Happy Saturday. Welcome to the SASN Poetry Slam for 2021. I'm deciding all by myself that this is going to be an annual event, but we're really excited that everyone was able to join us. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you to a few people who helped us pull together what I think is going to be just a really fun and wonderful event. So to Patricia Margulies, Vanessa McDonald Hobbs, Nancy Masterson Newkirk, Terrence Griffin, Nora Luongo, Fran Bartowski, who's going to be our illustrious hostess for today, and for our poets who took the time out to join us and are going to share their talents with us today. We just want to say thank you to all of you. This particular event is it's something that I certainly have been looking forward to for the last couple of weeks, in part because we're just in complicated times, and this is our opportunity to just sit back and to hear each other, to hear wonderful artists who are part of our community, to tune into each other, and just to have fun. And we're doing this in part because it's an opportunity for us to be inspired to do one particular thing, which is on March 24th is Giving Day for University. And Giving Day is a day that often comes and goes without a lot of attention, but it's a really important day for SASN. And this event is giving us an opportunity to sort of turn our energies collectively to supporting Giving Day and to getting behind getting the word out, not only among those who will be with us today, but we're going to ask you a special favor, which is to help us get the word out that March 24th is Giving Day. And there are a number of things that we want to support on Giving Day. So on that day, we have an opportunity to support the SASN Emergency Fund, which is a really important fund for us because it gives us an opportunity to support the needs of students who have life situations that come up that they need some extra funds to be able to get through. So for some people, it may be medical issues that come up. For some people, it may be just financial emergencies to pay rent or to make sure that they can eat or that they and their families will be well. And it's one of the most important ways that we take care of members of our community. And so Giving Day gives us an opportunity to build the resources that we need in order to support our students in that way. It also is an opportunity to support the Dean's Scholarship Fund. And again, a really important resource to make sure that students who have particular financial needs can be supported by the resources of SASN. So those kinds of funds and funds to be able to support special programming in departments across the college. So all of these kinds of opportunities are opportunities that we can support on that day. And so this is an opportunity to be inspired generally, but also to be inspired to support those funds that are coming up. So we're going to send out more information about Giving Day over the next 3 days. Remember, Wednesday is that day for us. And for the rest of the next hour and few minutes, we're just going to take an opportunity to be together, to enjoy each other, and to enjoy the talents of our wonderful poets. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Fran Bartowski. And I'll just do a really brief intro, but Dr. Bartowski is someone who everyone should get an opportunity to know. So Fran Bartowski is the author of An Afterlife, a 2018, An Afterlife 2018, as well as 3 other academic books. She was the director of RU-Nspired Women and Gender Studies program, and served as the chair of the Department of English and as interim chair of the Arts, Culture, and Media Department, ACM. And she's currently the director of Express Newark. But Fran is also has a phenomenal podcast. And if you have an opportunity to tune into the podcast, you should. It's called Rock Steady. And it just gives a wonderful opportunity to meet artists and scholars and activists and just members of our community who, many of us see but don't have an opportunity to hear from. And so if you have an opportunity to check out Rocksteady, please do. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Fran Bartowski to get us started on our event for today.
Thank you, Dean Jackie Mattis, on this lovely Saturday. I am so delighted to have been asked to MC this poetry slam today. I'm excited to hear some of our undergraduate and also graduated poets. From, as undergraduates, as well as someone who's graduated from the MFA program and someone else who I believe is scheduled to do so. And I just want to reiterate what Dean Mattis has said about the importance of Giving Day in our culture. And I think it's important to know that even the smallest donations add up. And, we are historically not a university with a long history of a culture of giving. But I think it's very important for students and their friends and their families and their peers to see themselves as in a position to give something back to the institution for the students who continue to be among us, whether it's for scholarship needs or needs of daily living, as Dean Mattis said. So keep that in your thoughts as you make Giving Day on Wednesday known in your networks and communities on social media and in person, insofar as you circulate in person these days. We're beginning to do so a little bit more, some of us who are doubly vaccinated and so on. Anyway, I will be introducing each of the poets, and one at a time. They will then have 5 to 8 minutes to read their work. And when everyone is done, we'll have a Q&A for those of you who can ask questions afterwards. So, are we set to begin? And the first poet, who I hope is here, I don't know, I don't see Artorius Augustine in the little boxes below. So maybe I'll come back to him if he joins us later. Does that seem like a good idea? Yes? All right, so let me begin with Al-Shaquan Lucas. I hope you are with us, Al, as I heard someone call you Al. And I do think Al and I might know each other from when you were a first-year student at the HLLC. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Good to see you again.
Good
And
to see you.
to see that you are a major in Africana and African American Studies and political science. You are class of 2021, right on time, I guess. And as a member of the Honors Living Learning College and community, you've been working in that community while at Rutgers-Newark. And I am so delighted to know that you're also a poet. And I will hand the microphone, as it were, over to you, and I will mute myself.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I just want to apologize for the situation with the camera earlier. Let me just open up for my first piece. I thought my first piece was good to come back to because it's been strange over the quarantine. I haven't really been writing much. So inevitably, this was the first time that I really had an opportunity to get in the headspace to try to create. But it also brought me back to a piece I'd written directly before the pandemic that I thought was still just timely with everything that was going on, just really within the nation. So I had wrote a piece called Where Do the Kids Go During the Riot? Where do the kids go during the riots? Do they solidify in soul-bound closets, suspended in society's sins that they don't yet comprehend? Or do they unravel into the streets like sweeping waves of angels embracing all of the scene? I wonder, do they hear the sirens? Red and blue beams piercing the iris, leaving rings like trees. Nature always has a way of corrupting things like that like that block where grandma's church used to be. Burned to the ground because of the supermarket across the street. I remember feeling like I watched the men with the bomb and the devil meet, and I recall the way it felt like my soul sang psalms as it sunk into the bottom of my feet. I wondered as the correlation of her purse taffy to the smoke and hellfire that riddled the scene stick to the mind like that little piece of candy that always got stuck to your teeth. It's hard to scrub a memory. Scenes of tanks rolling down streets like a children's fever dream haunts me in my sleep. I wonder how we got this far. When military meets man and the city stand frozen in the face of seas of citizens demanding to redefine what's free, how do we reassess such a thing? How do we add up all that suffering into something that might set us free, break trains and grow wings to fly out of wooden bird cages meant to carry us across seas? I wonder when it will be over. After the fires go out in the streets or after they go out in their hearts, when the fires go out, do we just sweep away the ashes? They wiped the tears from my eyes, but couldn't get the smell of sulfur out of my clothes, couldn't get the sight of hellfire off of my eyelids. To this day, I still sometimes see the smut leaving the whole city washed in a sea of pale gray. I think the entire city aged that day. Boys became men when the city fell without a soul trying to fix what was broken. It got hard to pray when the city's civility was left to hang from street lights like fruit of strange trees, staining everything in a haze of why are there tanks on the same street as the nursery. On the battlefield, days can feel like years, and when the city citizens become soldiers to the front lines, your every day sometimes feels like combat in a war zone, except you weren't a soldier, you were a child. You weren't prepared to see the streets paved in red or the babies laid to rest, weren't ready to see flowers and candles scattering the whole scene, scattering through the whole street, making the entire scene illuminated in the sheer lack of peace. Time doesn't wait until you're old enough to understand the destruction it evokes. The click persists at the worst possible times, the same way the fire did. So how do children remain children amongst the riot on the street? That was my first piece. And then I'll just be going to the second that I had wrote for this event, really just trying to think about charity and community. How do I help the brother that I can't see? Through the digital chasm, I send a call to my community. I remember days of camaraderie, summer suns beating down on food handouts or community events. The love so thick in the air that the whole city felt like a honeycomb, people buzzing up and down the streets, busy on their individual adventures. The city was filled with life. I remember our community. I remember the late night celebrations, performances that felt as if each note carried you through a lifetime, that the music of the city was a language inscribed so well that we all knew it as our mother tongue. We spoke in a language of unity. The city itself had a voice that demanded to be heard. I can still remember it. I can still hear it. I remember the exhilaration of helping a neighbor or that of being helped by a neighbor, that feeling like your world was somehow bigger than just yourself. I remember how long it has been since the last time any of us have seen our neighbors. I've come to know absence, come to speak in tongues of isolation, of face masks, gloves, and a 6-foot fortress. I've come to make friends with the silence of safety and knowing that the distance we create is the life raft of which we cherish. Initially, it felt as if my community died, as if when the music stopped and the world shuddered, that in that very moment the wind ceased. When our summer odysseys bled into the night sky, the city was engulfed in a subtlety I didn't recognize. When the city's lights went dark and the only sound was the whisper of anticipation, I still heard it. Faint but persistent, the sound of Newark's heartbeat as it held its breath. The love, the life, the city that still radiates through every street of the city, the history that still radiates through every street of this city. I still hear its life now, each beat louder than the last, carrying the cries of perseverance that have embedded into each of its bricks. I've spoken to the brother that I can't see. I know him as I know myself. I know that he is in need, and I know that through the silence there are still calls I've yet to hear, gaps I thought I didn't have the power to cross, but we've all learned to fly. Learned that community is more than just this physical space. That the wind in the city is embodied in every person who walks down the street with a conviction to blow down every hurdle, with a determination to help every family in their grasp. We know that the city still lives. In food handouts, in our donations, in our concern, Newark breathes through us and lives through us. So though we wait with bated breath for the idea of tomorrow, we still breathe. Our blood still flows and our brothers are still in need. So this brings me back to the question where we wonder, how do we help the brother that we cannot see? The answer is quite simple. First we look and open our eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with everyone. It's been a long time since I read any poetry, so this has been startling, but thank you.
That was great. Thank you for taking the time, making the time, writing the work, and finding wonderful inspiration in these difficult, challenging, stressful times. That was beautiful. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce Kira now. Kira is a major in psychology and a minor in fine arts, and she is also class of 2021. She's from Newark and is currently living on campus. She's a scholar and an activist and organizer, and also a student in the Honors Living Learning Community. I'm told that she is the founder of DOTM Foundation, which stands for Daughter of the Urban Mind, and plans to receive a master's in art therapy. And I'm hoping maybe in the Q&A we can find out more about what Daughter of the Urban Mind is, because I'm very intrigued by that name. Kira's going to read for us now.
Hi, yes, thank you for that introduction. So the piece that I have behind me is connected with this poem. I finished it a couple of days ago. This was a collaborative piece with a friend of mine who is also an artist, Gino. So enjoy that as I read the poem for you all. Step 1, pick my canvas. 10 by 21, no. 18 by 24. I am a senior now. Step 2, set up materials, place down plastic, stare at canvas. I have worked hard. I have cried loud. I have smiled big. Step 3, what color fits the desired mood? What color do you prefer? These 4 years zoomed by faster than what everyone said they would. Step 4, breathe. In and out. Fill up cup with clear, contaminated tap water. Where will I go? Am I prepared? Step 5, squeeze warm and cool colors into the circular plates with circular motions. I have been at this point before. This is nothing new. Step 6, mix and white, mix and complementary, mix and paint thinner. This is nothing new. I have been here before. Step 7, calm down, shaking hand, afraid to make inevitably beautiful mistakes. I have achieved much. I have much to achieve. I feel good. Step 8, this color was a good choice. Oops, I knew that would happen. I am surrounded by love, intelligence, opportunity, pride, Blackness. Step 9, how do I create texture again? This fro needs mo. I just need to breathe. I will be okay. I have made it thus far. Forward is the only way. Step 10. This color was a good choice. Oops. I knew that would happen. Step 9. Palm down, shaking hand, afraid to make inevitably beautiful mistakes. Step 8. Wash out white, wash out complementary, snap, close, paint thinner. Step 7. Put away paint tubes. Peek at painting in progress from every angle. Step 6. Breathe. In and out. Dump murky, contaminated tap water. Step 5. These colors fit the mood, but is this what you desired? Put up materials, peek at canvas, breathe. Step 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. Inevitably beautiful mistakes. Maybe we can talk about that later. I love that phrase. Let me introduce Vincent Toro. Vincent is a graduate of our MFA program in creative writing. He's the author of Stereo Island Mosaic, which was awarded the Sawtooth Poetry Prize by Asada Press and the Norma Farber First Book Award by the Poetry Society of America. He's a contributing editor for Quelly Literary Journal and the recipient of a Poets House Emerging Poets Fellowship and a number of other awards. His poems have been published in, I'm just going to read some of the places he has published his work: Buenos Aires Review, Codex, Rattle, Vinyl, Hawaii Review, Patterson Review, and is included in Best American Experimental Writing 2015. Vincent Toro teaches at Bronx Community College and is a writing liaison to the Cooper Union Saturday program, as well as a poet in the schools for the Dream Yard Project and the Dodge Poetry Foundation. So Vincent, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here virtually with all of you. It's wonderful to be sharing poesy on a Saturday afternoon. I got 3 pieces for you, 2 from my book, my newest book, and then 1 new piece. This is Mutiny in the Elder Care Facility. Yo, they had to summon 4 orderlies and my aunt to confiscate the knife that Bisabuela stashed in her bloomers. Snatched during breakfast, she held the blade to her chest like a cross. As the impious attempted to strip the shiv that was her only protection. From what? At 90, Bisabuela drives the men of the home to act like hormone-glutted teens, to pitch their wheelchairs before her wing in the hopes of catching just 1 whiff of her Vicks vapor rub. She had to get all Roberto Duran on one for trying to woo her during Sábado Gigante, tú sabes. It's been 6 weeks now, and no nurse's aide has been able to wash or feed her. She doesn't need them. Anyone. When viper-headed ex-husbands poached and depleted her oars, she swayed like a weary banyan but never cracked. And even when despots occupied the coast and forced her to replant herself in a city that worked double shifts to give her hypothermia, she was a bulwark, committed her own brand of insurgency by refusing to learn their language, vowing one day to reclaim her villita and never again set foot on this godforsaken continent for all her remaining days. but her damn kids. They made her return. Just because she forgot to turn the stove off one time. Now some infant in scrubs insist on wiping her? Well, she's had enough. Coño. She's keeping that knife. And anyone that tries to take it or anything else from her ever again can be sure to feel its bite. Thanks. Yeah, I'm a stage poet, so I'm still learning how to be a camera poet. So I got hung up there for a second. So thanks for bearing with me. This is the penultimate poem in my book. It's called The Case for Spanglish. And I think it might be important more than ever now. And I'm going to hold it up just in case we run into any problems. The Case for Spanglish. Because a corazón is more resilient than a heart. Sangre richer than blood. Because when my abuelo's spleen ruptured right there on Queens Boulevard, he yanked himself up with nothing but smog to hold on to and walked home 15 blocks before eventually collapsing on the bathroom floor. That takes babilla. Simple courage won't do. Because songs are nice, but a canción bathes inside the veins. The dank, dim nightclub lounges of my youth gave me confidence, it's true. But only Hector Lavoe's rooster calls can resurrect the dead. Only Celia Cruz's azúcar incites warring tribes to fall in love. Because an abrazo can shield you from famine and flame. A hug simply lacks that kind of sorcery. Because bochinche is both science and art. It can spread through the respiratory system like a viral infection and turn men into rats. Gossip is clearly no match for bochinche. Because el sol is spirit, the sun, its child. Because árboles are monasteries for the lost, while men don't think twice about felling trees. Because Dios inspires humility like no God can. Because vida blossoms from the mouth like a fulgent garden, whereas life is merely the title of a children's game, a syllable in search of a hyphen. Yeah, that one went a little better. I'm a little rusty and learning how to do this in front of the camera. Thanks for being with me here. This is my last one. This is a new one. And it's called Pero Like, a Boogaloo. And if any of y'all have any like old school Latinx New Yorican friends from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Pero Like is like one of the most commonly used like Spanglish terms. We use it like punctuation. So that the musical anchor of this poem is that phrase Pero Like. And just so y'all know, Boogaloo is an old genre of Latin music. It's not, I know like the white supremacists have co-opted the word, name part of there, but I want y'all to know that it's a Spanglish thing, it's a New Yorican thing. Boogaloo is a music from the 50s, 60s that infused salsa and black soul music. So this is Pero Like, a Boogaloo. Dykeman Street late night conguero confession, pero like loteria cards used as a second form of identification, pero like vegan picadillo and non-GMO sancocho seasoned with queer electro clash bounce, pero like bachata blended with trip hop, pero Paco de Lucia's 18 fingers might not be Latinx, pero they bleed Morocco and the Canary Islands onto his fretboard like two Converse All-Stars, one green and one blue, pero like Titi from Kingsbridge and Tata from Cibao, who likes his sushi con mambo, pero like Raul Julia owning Petruchio. pero like Panaderia's hosting weekly meetings of the macheteros, pero like Brunilda Ruiz's first plie hoisting jibaros into the stratosphere, pero like forget Nabokov, the only Lolita is Lebron, petrifying congressman with her glare, pero like it's like tembleque served after Sunday sermons, pero like barbecue pits in La Perla, pero like my namesake, whose trompo dropped 1 month before I kicked up into this joint, pero like, oye, mira, we are the unified field theory, tú sabes, pero like, this cat I know works for Big Pharma and got the nerve to call mandatory minimums essential, pero like, the family lechonera rots on an old cane field while the governor gives the beaches to his friends in Martha's Vineyard, pero like, how's that even a thing, pero like, Kelleher bilks the anoles, pero like, Roseo tweets and Bustaria stirred with cheap shots during work hours, pero like, Brock blockchains up the Guayacans with his filthy capris and faux swagger, pero like, the people were all like, pa fuera with all them diablos, pero yo now, Highway 18 is a sea filled with gorillos of rock beauties engraving frac tremors with their cannerous hatchlings, pero like, they can horse trade the coast, pero like, ain't no one leaving, like, we ain't even know how to say goodbye, like, we not scared of it or anything, pero it just isn't our thing, tú sabes, pero cause like, we don't do departure, ain't about getting gone, not about no absenteeism, pero like, it's just a coffee beach break, pero mi chacho is holding this spot for us, pero like, they can hold the spot for you too if you want, pero you got to be ready to share, bueno? Pero like, how many hurricanes we got to spin into legendary club tracks before things get real for you? Pero like, the swindle swamp dreck piles up like a Staten Island waste dump. Pero like, there's only so many plagues a boca can swill before the tongue goes numb. Pero like, yo creo que what really burns these leeches is they've been shipping the devastations to our verandas for like a zeta second or 30. Pero like, as you can see right here, we still laughing up in here anyways. Pero like, that's worth at least 3 wepas, no? Thank you, everybody.
Oh, poetry. It does lift us up and take us elsewhere. Let me begin by, I'd love for each of you to answer this question, but let me begin with Vincent since he just finished, and then we'll go to Kira and Al. Would you talk some, Vincent, about how you came to poetry as your medium in which to work and live and teach, it would seem, all three.
Yeah, I would say all three. It's a way of life for sure. I tell people it's not an occupation, and it's not necessarily words on a page alone. It's really like a way of life and really a way of seeing the world. Anyway, I had a roundabout way. Like I'm a working class Boricua kid from Washington Heights. My parents were both high school dropouts. Like I didn't grow up in an intellectual household. There weren't books in my house. I was also a child of abuse, to be quite honest. And I started writing in my journals, I think, as a way of dealing with that. Because I was bullied in the home, I was bullied in school and in the community. And writing became a retreat. And really it started with hip hop, because I'm a kid of the 80s when hip hop was just really burgeoning. And I just remember seeing MCs like my hero, Chuck D, who I actually got right here. And they just seem to be so powerful, you know, and I felt powerless. So I think I started by emulating MCs. I wasn't never really a great rapper. I used to write really whack rhymes in my journal, but I think it led me somewhere else. And luckily I found a mentor who took me under her wing and brought me into the theater world. And so again, it was really roundabout. So it started with like my love of hip hop, and then I moved into theater, and that got me involved in the slam scene and the spoken word scene in the 90s. And at which point I realized that there was nowhere else to go. And then I realized, okay, if I'm going to do this, I really need to know what's going on. And that's when I decided to go to school for creative writing and poetry. And really know my craft and know all its possibility. So that's kind of an abridged version of how I got here. But I really do think it started with, as I think a lot of art does for people, like just having the impulse, the desire to have a way to communicate something or channel something that wasn't fitting into everyday life or into everyday language. And it really just became my way to do that. And even now, as we're sitting in this pandemic, it's like poetry and music and art that I've been leaning on. And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of other folks.
Well, I certainly have that sense from Al and Kira as well. Kira, you want to take the next go at talking about how you find your way to poetry in your life, how you found your way there, how you've managed to stay with that in these times?
Yes. So for me, if I'm being honest, me and poetry and writing in general have a sort of a love-hate relationship. It's kind of it's I'm still coming into my voice and coming into my words and how I want to articulate myself, understanding who I am and how that can be translated when I speak. And so because I have that little bit of confusion in my personal life, I'm always struggling with coming back to writing. But each time I do come back to writing, it's a profound experience for me and it's very eye-opening, and I feel a release. I feel is therapy along with my other forms of art, because I am more of a multimedia artist. So I do kind of everything I get my hands on. But whenever I write, it is very much a very concrete experience. I can put those words down on paper and really reflect on them. And so I would agree that it's definitely kind of sometimes I write, sometimes I don't. But over this pandemic, it's just been a lot of self-reflection, and writing has become a greater form of art for me. And just really taking serious the power of words has been a big thing lately. Even in my music, I just recently erased all of my music because I realized that words are really powerful, and I want to be intentional about the things I'm ingesting and the things that I'm saying. So it's still a journey, and I'm still growing into that poet, but I'm very excited to see, where I'll continue to go after I graduate, especially.
Thanks. Al, could you talk? It sounded from what you said as if you took yourself back to poetry, both for this event, but also in the course of quarantine and the pandemic. Is that so?
Yeah, I would say so. I know, like, originally from how I found poetry, I found it almost by accident. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the poet Jasmine Mans, who is from the city of Newark, but she actually is an alumni from the same high school that I went to, a performing arts high school. So for years, I just kept trying to figure out. I've always had affinity for art. I love art, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I tried to do classical vocal. I tried to do drama, and nothing seemed to stick. And then I found poetry kind of by accident, because listening to her and other spoken word artists just made me realize that that was the first time where art wasn't, it was less about the performative nature of it. It was more about my own catharsis and my own ability to write and put my own emotions on paper. And I think that's what really made me gravitate towards poetry. And I think that's kind of what's happened to me over the quarantine as well. I feel like my poem kind of addressed it. I almost felt as if the world kind of paused for a moment, and it felt like everything had kind of died off. And I feel like even in my own personal life, I didn't feel as if anything in my life was interesting enough for me to have a drive to write about it or for me to put these emotions on paper. It felt um, really just meaningless. So I think trying to reconceptualize what was important to me in this moment and what could I write about was just really brought me back to poetry and just how am I feeling? What do I want to express?
You. Um, I have other questions I could ask, but I want to know if any of the three of you have questions you'd like to ask each other, and also to invite Dean Mattis and Nora and anyone else who might be in the participants in the chat to chime in. But first, do any of the three of you have questions for each other?
I would ask Mr. Toro, how have you readjusted to like trying to create art within this quarantine? Because I know like I felt as if there's like a lack of experience. Have you felt that, or have you been almost had a rush of creativity?
Quite the opposite, Al-Shaquan. I haven't. To be honest, I would say that it's been a struggle to be creative. To be quite honest, and I think it's been different for a lot of people. I think it has to do with who they are and who their process is. I think for me, art has always been a collaborative process. I know people think of writers as really solitary beings, and I do think you have to be alone to write for stretches. But where I draw my inspiration and my work really comes out of the work that I do in the classrooms, the work that I do when I'm in the theater. And I've been trying to find a way forward without those things at hand for me. And so really, I think I've just been mostly practicing kindness, just trying to be kind to myself and say, especially my second book came out. It came out from a big publisher, and it felt like I'm in the middle of my life. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of pressure to be the poet now. And I said, you know what? The pandemic's giving you the opportunity to say, you know what, let's take a step back and let's regroup. So I'm actually in the process of trying to find my way back and find a new process there. One thing that I've been doing that I did when I was a kid was I just started to like almost freestyle on the page to music. So I've been doing a little bit of that, and that's been helping me creatively. But I don't think that I'm there yet. And I don't mind saying that, but because I do think people need to know that the process for artists can be difficult at certain times, no matter what stage of your career you're in. And so, in fact, I'd love to hear what you and Kira are doing, in fact, creatively, what your process is right now, as we're all sheltering in place. I guess, should we pass the mic to Kira to respond to that?
Kira, you want to come in?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. I was seeing if Al wanted to go.
Yeah.
But I would say that I think that the pandemic has been a time for a lot of creativity for me. I think just the fact that I really had to sit down with myself and not move around kind of really focused me, and really made me think about what are the things that I want to create, because I was having a big artist block, being in school and figuring out, what's the next step. And the pandemic really just stopped me. It made me really think that my art is important to me, and I want to dive into it with, everything that I have to give. So over the pandemic, I've just been doing like a lot. I've been painting, trying to learn animation, trying to learn like graphic art, and just really learning the importance of doing research as well within my art. Because, sometimes, of course, I want to be a free thinker. I want to just draw stuff and put it away. But I had to understand that it is important to educate myself. What does art mean? What does it look like throughout the years? Who are, artists? What are their stories? And I think that that's so important, not to necessarily affect my art, but just to know that there is more than just what I see and what I think that art is. And what can I really learn about the different mediums and how to tap into them with like my full self, and not just, trying to be creative one day. So the pandemic has definitely been a point of creativity, and just trying to do different things and trying to be present as I'm doing them.
Thank you, Kira. Let's see. Are there questions in the Q&A?
There is a question for Kira, actually.
Oh, okay.
Another one coming in, but I'll read the one for Kira first. So Kira, what's the concept behind Daughters of the Urban Mind, and how is it related to art therapy, is the question.
Okay. So Daughter of the Urban Mind, the Dotem Foundation, it kind of began, I was writing a blog my freshman year, and just trying to get my thoughts down, again, trying to understand how I wanted to speak and like what it meant to understand my head. So it started out as a blog, but service is not necessarily, the Daughter of the Urban Mind Foundation is more of a service community organization that focuses on including youth in inner cities to serve inner city enter our communities to, help us out. But I think it's so much more powerful when we see each other helping each other out. And I think it's also powerful to see youth getting into service organizations and going around their communities and knowing that we too can do the work of getting resources, fundraising, getting into the more technical side of organizations, and it's not scary, and we can do it too. So that's what the Dotem Foundation really is grounded on. And so we've done a couple of projects, community service projects. One was during the pandemic. We made masks. We also handed out food and water and blankets, just anything that we can really get our hands on. But it's been over the past 3 years. It started at Rutgers. So just getting that support from the community was so important, and it really propelled the Donor Foundation to what it's become now. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Thank you, Kira. We have another question. This is really for all the poets. And the question is there a difference between how you think for like a poem versus a spoken word poem? Are they two different things? Do you write them, do you work through them similarly, or is there a transition that you have to make?
Well, from my own experience, I feel as if I approach poetry kind of differently because I really have never written poetry for it to be read. I've always read it with the thought of my performance of it in the way that I would be giving it on stage. So it feels like, to a different extent, like my poetry normally works on like just random trains of thought. I'll just ride a train of thought as far as I can, then go somewhere else, and then hopefully try to splice all the ideas into something that makes sense. So normally that is my approach of trying to sort through my ideas.
Kira, do you or Vincent want to take on that question too?
Yes, I would agree. For me, writing is definitely, I'm more of a all-around performative person. So when I write, it's just a lot of my thoughts and then a lot of thinking about how I can express them, also like with my gestures and with my body. So I think it's all just kind of the same train of thought and then try to bring it in at the end.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. It's one I actually spent my whole career thinking about, because I think a lot of my work is actually, it's a mission to return the arts back to a singular art form. So before industrialization and capitalism, there was only one art. It was the commodification of these things that created genres and categories and disciplines. And so when I create work, my ultimate goal is that the poem can function as a poem that you're reading in a book. It can function as a piece of music that's orated and performed out loud on a stage, and also that it's can function as a piece of visual art when you're looking at the book. I don't always succeed, and I think that from poem to poem, they might be informed by one of those things than the other. But I think that I'm always pursuing this kind of unity of the poem being able to stand on all of those levels. I want it to be able to hold up when I get on a stage. And if I'm not there and someone wants to read the poem alone online in a journal or in a book, it works. But then also they can step back and just see like the book itself. Particularly my first book was very much focused on the poem as a visual art piece as well.
Struck by the fact that you mentioned earlier that you work in poetry and theater, right? And theater as a very sort of ancient art form that, of course, is built on words that are poetic, if not poetry itself. I like what you said about the division of things into different media and genre, because of how we need to classify and commodify things. Any other questions at the moment? for each other. I was very taken out with your brother you don't know in the second piece that you read. I don't think that was exactly the phrase, but it was the way you summoned someone as kin who was in fact a stranger, right? And the way that that, I think, sort of speaks to the moment that we're living in these days, right? Where we don't know, we don't get to see a lot of the people who are our kin. And what do we make of the encounters with strangers that are also masked, usually, right? How do we get a sense that someone is our brother or a sister or a daughter? To borrow from Kira's naming of the foundation, which I love. Any other questions from you all to each other? Because we have a bit of time. Dean Mattis, any questions that are bubbling for you that you'd like to ask?
I think for me is sort of as we enter into the rest of the weekend and our post spring break period, like I think about transformations because I think about spring. And the question that's bubbling in my mind is, have you written a piece that has transformed the way you think of yourself as an artist?
Great question.
I was just gonna say, I have one piece that I think was really almost like a Bildungsroman within itself. I had a piece called When Queerness and Blackness Meet, in which I personified both queerness and blackness and tried to explain what was the interaction at like a party, trying to maneuver the relationships with both. And I realized so much about how I viewed my own social identities and the way that I viewed myself through personifying them outside of my body and having them be characters that I had interact with myself. So I feel like that really changed the way I really viewed it. Yeah.
Truly interesting conceptualizing of what you were up to and how that worked for you. Kira, did you want to come close to that question?
Yes. So I actually recently wrote a rap with artist friend of mine, which was very interesting. And in writing that piece, I think the thing that like I realized about my artistry was that I really couldn't be afraid again to like bring my whole self and my whole story into my art. I think sometimes I can be very, just cautious and hesitant about being completely open about who I am, my interest, what I know, what I'm interested in, things like that. And so writing that piece and knowing that, this new medium that I'm tapping into that I don't really know if I'm good at, quote unquote. It was just a lot of trying to like doubt myself and get over that doubt. And so I just think that working through my art in general and writing those pieces is really me having a conversation with myself, as I was talking about too. Like just being so honest within that little bubble. It just is always like, whoa, like, did I really think that? And then when I say it, I'm able to reflect on it and just understand a little bit more about who I am and who I'm becoming. So I think that's always an experience, but that rap was definitely like, okay, this is something different. So it was exciting.
Kira, I think what you just said there, I feel like it kind of alludes to the fact that the artistic process is a transformative process. So like what I would say to add to this conversation is I think it's like as I was sitting here thinking about the question, I realized that all of my pieces I could claim that because art is a process by which I'm coming to know the world and I'm coming to know myself. I do think that depending on where you're working on, those things can happen in a particular area. Like my first book, Stereo Island Mosaic, was very much about coming to understand my Latinx identity and Latinx and Caribbean history. my last book, Tertulia, was very much about trying to understand more expansively, like my place in the larger world, a world that was going through a huge paradigm shift, even before the pandemic, politically, socially, culturally, environmentally, and what that means for me as my role as an educator, right? Like how I bring that into the classrooms with my students. So I think that like the larger work can be kind of focused on those things, but I feel like always the whole point of creating art and even taking in art, I think that even for the art I make, there's the art that I take in, certain albums, certain films, certain books, that they help transform the person that I am too. It's really how we facilitate a transformative experience as human beings. And it's why the arts are essential, even though certain neoliberal factions in the world don't think that art is needed. It's absolutely essential for humans to grow.
Thank you, Vincent. There's one more question in the Q&A, and it's about asking how you relate to Newark, and the question is about the Newark of 1967. I guess I would like to ask, what about the Newark of now? Because certainly last summer, during the Black Lives Matter, the very beginning of those protests, Newark was a model of how it went beautifully and well with thousands of people in the streets. And you're from here, you've been shaped by being here because you're educated at Rutgers Newark. I would love to hear each of you say something about that, and I hope the person who wrote the question doesn't mind that I'm shifting from the past to the present. So who would like to go first? Al, why don't you start?
All right, I'll just answer both of those really quickly. As someone who is I think tracing back, I'm fourth generation in Newark. So I feel like so much of my work, as I said, incorporates my life story. It incorporates heavy biblical allusions due to like my upbringing. It incorporates urban references. It incorporates my grandmother's stories from her whole experience growing up and living within Newark. And then it also references my own living in the city now within modern day. So I feel as if it's kind of impossible to almost figure out how the ways in which Newark influences my art, because it feels as if it's almost one. I'm someone from Newark, and Newark has influenced everything that I've done to a certain extent. And I think just trying to think more of what is happening near the more modern day protests, I feel as if it really has changed the way protests and, well, how we view activism within the city. I feel as if we've had a resurgence within activism, especially within the younger community. And I think that kind of hope really does incorporate into the way that I will speak from my own perspective because I can't speak for everyone, but that youth are viewing the city again. I think to a larger extent, it gives us more ideas of how many individuals in Newark are engaged within the community, are thinking about the ways that they can give back, the ways that they can aid towards communal growth. And I really can't wait to the day when we're getting out of this quarantine upside down world so we can actually reap the benefits of how much community building has been being done both before and during this quarantine.
Thank you so much. Great thoughts there. Kira?
Yes, I would have to second everything Al just said. That was perfect. I think that this time has been very interesting, and I always say everything I did was in Newark growing up, like every single thing, working, activities, camp, everything was always in Newark. And kind of as I got older, being at Rutgers, I'm still in Newark, but you kind of get to this very particular community at Rutgers, which is still very engaged in Newark. But I kind of really secluded myself in a sense, just focusing on school sometimes. But during this pandemic, during the protests, I've really been able to contact people from all over Newark and really understanding again the beauty of the plethora of things that are in Newark, not just history-wise, but things that are happening currently. And so just learning about the different establishments that are coming up, like the Newark Border Coalition, which has been doing so much work, the Alkaline Express on South Orange Avenue, so much work, and just people that come from Newark really wanting to show out for the community is so beautiful. And like Al said, one is not to speak for other people, but I know as I was a youth, it was so beautiful to see people in my community try and do so much work for us. And so I hope that the youth see the same thing and that they are inspired and that they are excited to see what is going to happen, what is going to happen next and what can they do to aid in that fight really for us to get to wherever we need to be. So I second that, Al.
Thank you, Kira.
Yeah, as the older one in the group talking to all this, I'll speak to the present and the past. So first of all, personally, I don't know what I'd do without Newark. Newark has been an important city for my growth. I became an educator in Newark. My first gig was I was a 6th grade English teacher at Rafael Hernandez Elementary in the north side of Newark. So I became a teacher in Newark. I went to Rutgers Newark for my MFA. A lot of my friends and colleagues and artistic co-conspirators are from Newark. And I really do think that Newark it's really an underestimated city. It's one of the most important cities. When you think about American history, if you go back to 68, we want to think about places like Baltimore and Ferguson and things that we've seen in the last few years. The 68 protests in Newark were an absolutely essential moment in the activist fight. And we're talking about a city whose mayor is a poet, whose parents were poets and artists and leftist activists. They were incredibly radical. To see that in a city like Newark, you don't see that in other places. That doesn't happen in New York. People forget that a huge part of the Harlem Renaissance actually happened. People like Sarah Vaughan came out of Newark. So it's a really important city that has a really rich cultural life, but I think people often overlook. I'd argue that it's nationally overlooked for issues of racism. But I think when people take a closer look at the city, I'm always, whenever someone calls me to do something in Newark, I'm there. I love Newark. I always want to be connected. And I hope more people understand that. I've learned a lot from the people in Newark. People in Newark are like, you see it in Kira and Al-Shaquan. We're talking about young people in Newark who are like already activist minded, community minded, education's important. And people are tight in Newark in a way that like other cities, people are not tight. And I really respect that. And I adore that. And I hope finally like more and more people get, maybe because it's sandwiched between Philly and New York City, people don't understand, but Newark is like, it's the place to be. I love Newark. All right, I'll leave it at that because I can keep talking about that city.
That's great. That's a great place to take it and leave it in the best sense of the word. And I'm going to hand things back over to Dean Mattis for her closing. That was a great. Thank you, all three of you.
Yeah, I agree. It's such a wonderful place to end. And the one of the things I've been thinking about in the time that we've been together, a couple of things. One of which is it's such a powerful thing to be in the presence of artists, right? And to be in the presence of artists who are from your home space. And just so Kira, Al, Vincent, thank you so much for just being, right? Just thank you for the work you do. Thank you for the work you've created. Thank you for showing up here and allowing us to be able to sit together and to just be able to participate in this moment together. So I'm really struck by how important it is for us to be able to have these moments when we can sit in each other's presence and simply be able to celebrate each other and celebrate the work that those in our community are doing. So I'm going to look forward to having more of these kinds of opportunities, both with poetry, but also with the arts and just with other aspects of the work that's happening here at Rutgers Newark. You talked about Newark being a special place, which I completely agree, and how underestimated Newark is as a space. And I think the same thing is true for Rutgers Newark, and I think the same thing is true for SASN. It's just a glorious space with amazing young people like you who are either here or have been here and are now out in the world doing phenomenal work. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who made today possible. Thank you to everyone who came and participated and celebrated with us. And I'll just leave with, again, just in celebration of who we are. We need your help just getting the word out about Giving Day on March 24th, Wednesday, March 24th. So help us be able to celebrate our students, help us to be able to celebrate our alumni and the amazing folks who are here in our departments every day. So on Instagram, Facebook, all the other platforms that I have no idea about, TikTok, you know, whatever they may be called, if you can help us get the word out about Giving Day. And as Fran said earlier, if we send the message that no gift is too small, whether it's $10 or $5 or $10 million, no gift is too large either. We certainly will be able to put those resources to good use to celebrate the kinds of work we see today and the amazing folks that we saw today. So thank you all. So we'll let you go into the rest of your weekend. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to a phenomenal Giving Day. Take care, everyone.